Low interest rates and dropping house prices mean that the local property market is currently enjoying a spike in demand, especially in coastal areas. Property sales in places like Cape Town, Port Elizabeth and KwaZulu-Natal are currently outperforming the inland city hubs as buyers look to move to the sea. With no international travel allowed during this lockdown period, areas that traditionally attracted interest from international markets are now listed as a steal. Other trends include rising demand for Airbnb stock as the work-from-home crowd looks to settle in quieter areas away from the city life, if you like. To help us understand these trends a bit better, let's bring in via Skype Grant Smee, who's Managing Director of Only Realty in Cape Town. Grant, thanks for making time for the AM report. Interesting trends, if I do say so myself. Let's start with the coastal areas and how they're faring. Is that because these properties are much cheaper than they would be traditionally, or are more and more people realizing that the city perhaps isn't what it's all made out to be, especially during something like a global health crisis?
Yeah, morning, Ayanda. Thanks. Yeah, so certainly it's actually a combination of both. It's both a lifestyle choice for people who've traditionally lived in Joburg or primary cities, and they're looking to move out to secondary cities more for lifestyle because of remote working, the ability to do so, as well as the fact that there are a lot of properties coming on the market, and there's first a price pressure because of an oversupply, as well as the low interest rates make the properties that haven't really moved from a price point more affordable than they have been in the past.
That's interesting. So when we speak about a spike in demand, how far from pre-lockdown levels are we really?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, particularly in Cape Town, the property market was under pressure, certainly because of price increases over the last couple of years. So the market had slowed substantially. So leading into lockdown, the Cape Town market was certainly a lot lower. I think where you're finding higher demand in areas like PE, George, Mossel Bay, and up the north coast is certainly off a strong foundation of demand leading into lockdown. So there was quite a high level of demand and activity. Then the pent-up demand during the hard lockdown has really come out post-lockdown into a high level of activity. Now, it remains to be seen whether that level of activity continues for the foreseeable future. Hopefully it does, but I do think we're going to see a dip coming towards the end of the year and early next year.
Yeah, and that certainly was going to be my next question, right? The sustainability of this current trajectory. We know that a big stimulus, if you like, was the unprecedented cuts in things like the repo rate that we've seen this year because of the pandemic. One imagines, though, that we're going to go back to the interest rates we've seen before this pandemic, and that's certainly going to affect demand.
Yeah, most certainly. So it's going to affect demand in a big way, but also qualified buyers. So people who have saved up deposits who are qualified to buy seem to be buying at the moment, and we're going to sort of run out of qualified buyers, people that have got good creditworthiness as well as have saved deposits, and that's going to come or there's going to be less of those buyers in the market towards the beginning of next year, as well as the oversupply of stock, which I expect to come due to the effects of the economic lockdown really coming to the fore early next year. It's going to be a sort of combination of factors that will slow the market down in the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Okay, Grant, in my mind, as an outsider, that suggests to me that the property market in its current form is relatively unsustainable. I mean, if it took a global health crisis to spur demand, it suggests to me that perhaps the ways we've been doing things until now doesn't necessarily make sense if we're trying to stimulate some economic growth within the sector specifically.
Yeah, so certainly not sustainable, and I think what people need to start considering is you speak about low interest rates. Interest rates will increase, like you said, and that's going to affect affordability going forward, not only for people being able to buy, but also the affordability of people living in their homes where they've bought at a low interest rate and interest rates increase. So that's going to have an effect, as well as a massive amount of supply coming to market from not only developers completing their stock in urban hubs, but also a lot of stock coming to the market where people are either distressed or being forced to sell because of affordability and running out of money effectively due to increasing unemployment rates and lower salaries.
You also refer to stock quite often. For those who don't know what you mean by that, break that term down for us and why it's significant.
Yeah, so it's just the amount of properties on the market or available for people to buy. So if we talk about developer stock, we're traditionally talking about sectional title units, apartments and flats in sectional title complexes, otherwise individual homes in suburban areas.
All right. And when we speak about this demand, I imagine it's not a homogeneous trend, for lack of a better term. I mean, even when you think about properties, there are those in the upper echelons of society and those that are likely to be more affordable. And perhaps what I'm trying to get to is, where are we seeing this demand? I mean, is it essentially the affluent people allowed to move into those areas and buy new homes, or are we seeing newer players, first-time buyers, for instance, also benefiting from this condition, if you like?
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that. You know, the first thing is, when we talk about the property market, unfortunately, people take a global view, and the property market really needs to be broken down in provincial level, city level, and suburb level. So you can look at individual property markets very, very differently. There could be a buyer's market in one suburb and a seller's market in another. What we're seeing a lot of activity actually is in the first-time buyer market, and that's because the banks are lending 100% bonds, so you don't necessarily need a deposit at all to buy properties, and obviously with the low interest rates and then the price pressure on the affordable housing level, so anything below 1.2 million rand, it means that a lot of first-time buyers are entering the market versus renting in the past. And then we're seeing a sort of a dip in the market above the 2.5 million level, and then again above the 4 million level there are purchases happening, but not nearly the levels that were in the past.
There's also a term being thrown around, semigration. I wonder if you know anything about this and will help us understand why it's important.
Yes, so semigration, and I'm one of those that's immigrated from Joburg to Cape Town. So instead of immigrating from a city or country to another country, people are moving for various reasons, for lifestyle options, for economic reasons, or for safety, to move away from sort of crime-ridden areas. So, you know, semigration is people moving from Joburg or what they call in Cape Town upcountry to Cape Town or coastal areas, moving from and to commuter areas. So moving from Joburg to the north coast, where they can jump on a plane and be in Joburg within an hour, or within an hour flight. So semigration is just movement around the country away from economic hubs to areas for lifestyle, economic, or moving away from crime. It's really essential what semigration is.
And ironically, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So we all run away from economic activity in a place like Joburg just to create the very same experience in a place like Cape Town. But perhaps that's a different discussion. Let me get you a sense of where you think things will be headed as we ease into level 1 of the lockdown, and especially, more importantly, as we anticipate these interest rates to go back to what they were before COVID-19 hit.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't see much change in terms of levels. So level 2 to level 1 is not going to change what's happening in the property market. But what is going to have an effect is, you know, people running out of savings, the effects of lower salaries, a high unemployment rate, and credit record issues for non-payment of debt is going to come to the fore now as we go into December, January. And what I foresee is in January we're going to have, firstly, more distressed stock coming to the market. And therefore an oversupply, and therefore price pressure. So I think the real opportunity in terms of buying in certain areas is going to come in January. The banks will remain open to lending. They need to increase their business there. So in terms of if you've got a good credit record, your ability to get a bond will be significantly easier. And I think that buyer's market essentially is going to stay in place for a good 18 to 24 months. On the flip side, tenants have much more ability to negotiate the rental, because there's a lot of vacancies at the moment because of you know, a lot of Airbnbs coming to market, as well as an oversupply of stock from developers. And developers also offering quite flexible lease terms, so landlords are under pressure to reduce their rentals and also offer flexible lease terms to their tenants.